The $165 million mistake started with a phone call at 7:26 a.m. on a Wednesday, exactly 6 months and 12 days after they restructured my position. Klaus Wagner, thick German accent, very polite. Mr. Donovan, we have discovered a significant problem with Lone Star Industrial's API compliance status. Are you available to discuss? I was drinking coffee in my small office above Murphy's Tavern, watching the sunrise over the Dallas Industrial District. 6 months earlier, I had been Lone Star's safety compliance officer. Now I was about to find out they'd made the biggest mistake in company history. My name's Carl Donovan, 46, and I've been keeping oil equipment manufacturers legally compliant for 12 years. Before that, I spent 16 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, making sure refineries didn't explode and pipelines didn't leak. Same principle, different uniform. When something breaks in oil and gas, people die. When compliance breaks in manufacturing, companies disappear. The day that started this whole mess was a Tuesday. Paige Crawford walked into our quarterly safety meeting and called my compliance team legacy friction with outdated operational overhead. I knew right then Lone Star Industrial was heading straight into a brick wall. Paige had that entitled MBA energy you see everywhere now. Expensive suit, Apple Watch, and the kind of confidence that comes from never actually failing at anything that mattered. CEO's niece, newly appointed VP of Digital Transformation, whatever that meant in an 87-year-old oil equipment manufacturing company. She didn't shake hands when introduced. She gave finger waves and said things like disruptive innovation and operational agility while sipping a $12 green smoothie like she'd invented efficiency. Nobody asked her to present that day. Nobody stopped her either. She clicked through a PowerPoint titled Streamlining Legacy Functions, Phase 1. Phase 1, it turned out, was gutting my department. I'd been Lone Star's named API compliance officer for 12 years. That's 12 years of building safety protocols from scratch, watching regulatory changes sweep through oil equipment manufacturing like tornadoes, documenting every nightmare scenario the EPA, OSHA, and DOT could throw at us. I had 6 external audits under my belt with 0 violations. My filing cabinets were organized like an Army logistics system. Everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Paige didn't even know what API certification meant. I watched her Google it during the meeting. That morning, she stood there grinning with her uncle's company credit card, called compliance an outdated support function, and suggested we automate oversight using AI solutions. My department was redundant, she said, overstaffed. My $85,000 salary plus $12,200 in benefits eliminated. That's $97,200 in annual savings, she bragged. Almost a full marketing budget upgrade. Someone actually clapped. I didn't. I just capped my pen and asked, "Are we done here?" Paige left with her spreadsheet and a satisfied little nod. I went back to my office and opened a fresh binder. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even surprise. It was protocol, military habit. When someone's about to make a catastrophic mistake, you document everything and prepare for damage control. I started backing up files. Every access credential, every compliance designation, every legal document where my name appeared as the responsible authority. Most people at Lone Star didn't realize our entire regulatory framework still required my formal signature. Every quarterly filing, every API certification, every safety audit response had Carl Donovan listed as primary contact. No replacement had been designated. Nobody could replace me without board approval and formal reassignment paperwork filed within 21 calendar days. But Paige didn't know that. Her uncle Garrett, the CEO, probably didn't either. At first, I thought someone would pump the brakes. Maybe HR would hesitate. Maybe Garrett, who once called me the guy who keeps us out of federal prison, might speak up. But nothing. HR sent the reclassification paperwork 4 days later. My new title, Senior Administrative Coordinator. My security clearance was downgraded. My invitations to leadership meetings disappeared overnight. I nodded, no complaints, even congratulated Paige when she bragged about hitting her first efficiency target. She actually gave me a thumbs up and called me Carl D. So I printed the original API designation letter, the one signed by the board in 2018, and emailed it to my personal account with a timestamp. Then I printed 2 copies. One went into my home filing cabinet, the other into a binder labeled Regulatory Continuity, Archive Only, and quietly placed it in the legal department storage room. 3rd shelf, left side. I didn't tell anyone. See, people think revenge needs to be loud, dramatic exits and angry speeches about being unappreciated, but nobody appreciates a landmine either until someone steps on it. The real beauty was in Section 11.4 of our business continuity plan, a clause I'd added 3 years ago after watching a competitor get hammered with $2.8 million in fines for improper compliance handoffs. It stated that any change to the named API compliance officer must be formally reassigned by board resolution within 21 calendar days, or the designation becomes legally invalid retroactive to the vacancy date. Oil equipment manufacturing compliance fines start at $5,000 per day for minor violations. After 90 days of continued violation, they escalate to $15,000 per day. The math gets ugly fast. Page had no idea. Legal hadn't checked. Garrett just signed off on the efficiency report without reading the details. 7 weeks after the streamlining, I submitted my resignation. Clean and simple. Effective 14 days from today, I will be stepping down from my position at Lone Star Industrial Equipment. That's it. No drama, no exit interview demands, no company-wide email about being undervalued. They processed it like routine paperwork, disabled my access by end of day. The IT ticket was so rushed they misspelled my name and forgot to update the compliance registry. My son Tommy called that night to check on me. He's a junior at UT Austin studying petroleum engineering. Smart kid. Smarter than his old man in most ways, but he inherited my attention to detail. Dad, you sure about this? What about my tuition? Spring semester's coming up. Trust me, son. This is going to work out. Your old man didn't spend 16 years in the Army Corps without learning how to plan for contingencies. Sounds like you've got something up your sleeve. Just following proper procedures. Sometimes that's all it takes. That weekend, I updated my profile on the Federal Compliance Registry, setting my certification to active, executive designation relinquished, no replacement filed, effective day 28. Then I registered as an independent consultant specializing in crisis compliance recovery. 48 hours later, my phone started ringing. By Monday, I had 3 serious inquiries, 2 from law firms representing companies in regulatory trouble, 1 from a boutique consulting group, and 1 from a German equipment conglomerate that specialized in acquiring American mid-market manufacturers. That last one made me smile. Across town, Lone Star hummed along without missing a beat. No exit procedures, no knowledge transfer, no replacement training. Page was already planning phase 2 of her optimization strategy. Garrett started talking about the company's new agility mindset in industry interviews. Nobody noticed the compliance clock ticking toward day 22. I set up shop in a small office above Murphy's Tavern on Industrial Boulevard. 2 desks, a coffee maker that worked half the time, and a view of the old Texaco refinery. Rent was $1,100 a month. My first consulting contract paid $280 per hour. The math worked better than my old salary. Every morning I'd walk downstairs and get coffee from Murphy, old Irish guy who'd run the place for 32 years. We'd talk about the Cowboys, the weather, sometimes about business. He knew I'd left Lone Star, but didn't pry. Military guys understand when someone doesn't want to talk about work. You know, Carl, Murphy said one morning, my grandfather worked the oil fields in East Texas. 38 years, never missed a day. When they brought in those college boys to run things, he said something I'll never forget. What's that? The young ones think they can drill better than the old ones, but they never ask why the old ones capped the wells that way in the first place. Day 47 of Lone Star's compliance violation, I got a call from an equipment company in Houston. Their compliance officer had quit without notice, and they were facing an API audit in 6 weeks. Panic mode. I quoted them $320 per hour plus expenses for a 5-week emergency engagement. They said yes before I finished the sentence. The work was familiar, but the urgency was new. Company called Coastal. Pressure Systems. They manufactured high-pressure vessels for offshore drilling. Their previous compliance guy had been cutting corners, filing incomplete documentation, missing deadlines. Classic case of someone who thought the regulations were suggestions. When the API audit notice arrived, management realized they were sitting on a potential $2 million fine exposure. I spent the first week reconstructing their documentation trail, cross-referencing manufacturing records with compliance filings, identifying gaps. Military precision applied to regulatory chaos. By week 3, I had them back in compliance with days to spare. The audit went smooth as glass. 0 violations, 0 fines. They paid my invoice the same day and asked about retainer arrangements. Day 73, I was on a plane to Oklahoma helping a pressure vessel manufacturer navigate an EPA investigation. Their previous compliance team had missed a filing deadline. The potential fines were in the millions. My job was to reconstruct their documentation trail and prove good faith compliance efforts. Military precision and attention to detail. Same skills, different battlefield. The Oklahoma job taught me something important about the oil equipment industry. Companies were scared. New regulations. International buyers demanding higher standards. Insurance companies getting pickier about coverage. Everyone needed someone who understood the rules and could navigate the bureaucracy. Someone with a track record. Day 94. The escalating fine structure kicked in for Lone Star. Not that anyone there knew it yet. Oil equipment manufacturing compliance violations become exponentially more expensive. After 90 days, the daily penalty jumped from $5,000 to $15,000. Still invisible, still accumulating, still retroactive. I was back in Dallas when Tommy called with news. He'd been accepted into UT's Accelerated Compliance Engineering program. New field, growing demand, excellent job prospects. "Guess who inspired me to look into it?" he said. "Your old man's rubbing off on you. More like I realized there's job security in keeping people out of trouble. Plus the starting salaries are really good. Professor says with all these international companies buying American oil equipment plants, they need people who understand both sides." Tommy was right. The industry was changing. Foreign companies with deep pockets were snapping up American manufacturers, but they needed local expertise to navigate federal regulations, someone who understood both the technical requirements and the business impact. Day 118, Lone Star announced the deal of the century. Press release went out at 8:30 a.m. Lone Star Industrial Equipment to be acquired by Nordic Energy Solutions for $165 million. The story made the Dallas Business Journal front page. Garrett was quoted extensively about Lone Star's innovative operational transformation under new leadership. Page was quoted too. She'd positioned herself as the architect of Lone Star's lean operational model that attracted international attention. The article mentioned her strategic elimination of redundant legacy functions as a key factor in Nordic's interest. I read it over my morning coffee at Murphy's. Murphy saw me smiling at the newspaper. "Good news?" he asked. "You could say that. Sometimes patience pays off." My grandfather used to say something else about the oil business. The well that flows fastest empties first, but if you don't tend the pressure right, the whole thing blows. Day 142, the due diligence team from Nordic Energy Solutions arrived in Dallas. Professional, thorough, and led by a woman named Dr. Ingrid Weber, who spoke 4 languages and had the kind of attention to detail that made German engineering legendary. Her team included Klaus Wagner, a compliance specialist who'd spent 19 years auditing American acquisitions for European oil companies. They spent the first week reviewing financial records, operational metrics, and safety protocols. Everything looked clean. Page had prepared beautiful presentations about streamlined operations and reduced overhead. The numbers were impressive. The timeline was aggressive. Garrett had already started talking about integration plans. Nordic executives were optimistic. This looked like exactly the kind of lean, efficient American oil equipment manufacturer they wanted in their portfolio. Lone Star's management team was confident. Legal had reviewed everything twice. The deal was on track for closing in 3 weeks. Page was already planning her post-acquisition role, talking about leading the integration of Nordic's European best practices with Lone Star's operational agility. She'd positioned herself as the bridge between old American manufacturing and new international efficiency standards. The second week of due diligence focused on regulatory compliance. Klaus Wagner methodically reviewed every certification, every filing, every audit response from the past 2 years. He cross-referenced personnel records with compliance designations, checked renewal dates on certifications, verified that all required signatures were current and valid. Day 150, a Wednesday afternoon, Klaus was working through a stack of API compliance documents when something caught his attention. The signature on every major filing for the past 134 days belonged to someone who wasn't listed on the current organizational chart. Carl Donovan. The name appeared on quarterly safety reports, environmental compliance filings, and certification renewals, but according to HR records, Carl Donovan had been restructured out of his compliance role over 4 months ago. Klaus spent Thursday morning trying to understand the transition. He asked HR for documentation showing the formal replacement process. They sent him organizational charts showing the new structure but couldn't produce any board resolutions or federal notifications about compliance officer changes. When he asked legal about the handoff procedures, they referred him to the business continuity plan filed in their archive room. Day 156, exactly 22 compliance cycles since my designation had been terminated without replacement. Klaus Wagner was in Lone Star's legal archive room cross-referencing regulatory filings with personnel records. Routine due diligence, nothing unusual. He wasn't looking for problems, just verifying that all certifications were current and properly maintained. That's when he found my binder. Third shelf, left side, exactly where I'd left it 5 months earlier. Regulatory continuity, archive only. Klaus opened it and started reading the original API designation letter, the business continuity plan with section 11.4 highlighted, the timeline requirements, the board resolution from 2018 that was never superseded. Klaus spent an hour going through every document. Then he cross-referenced the dates with Lone Star's current compliance registry. Then he called Dr. Weber. The math was simple and brutal. Day 22 through day 155 equals 134 days of compliance violation. First 90 days at $5,000 per day equals $450,000. Remaining 44 days at $15,000 per day equals $660,000. Total exposure, $1,110,000, and climbing at $15,000 per day until resolved. But it got worse. Because no replacement had been designated, every regulatory filing, every API certification, every compliance document submitted during those 134 days was legally invalid. Lone Star had been misrepresenting its regulatory standing to customers, insurers, and potential buyers for over 4 months, including Nordic Energy Solutions. Dr. Weber reviewed Klaus's findings that evening. As head of Nordic's acquisition team, she'd seen compliance gaps before, but nothing this systematic. This wasn't an oversight or a paperwork delay. This was a complete breakdown of corporate governance that created massive liability exposure for any acquiring company. She called an emergency meeting with her team. The legal implications were staggering. Nordic would be acquiring not just a company with over $1 million in accumulated fines, but a company that had been systematically misrepresenting its regulatory status during the entire negotiation process. Every certification they'd relied on in their investment analysis was potentially invalid. Klaus had also discovered something else in my documentation. The business continuity plan explicitly outlined the 21-day replacement requirement. Section 11.4 was highlighted and annotated with references to specific federal regulations. This wasn't accidental. Someone at Lone Star had written detailed procedures to prevent exactly this scenario, and management had ignored them. Friday morning, Dr. Weber requested a meeting with Lone Star's full leadership team. She told them she needed to review some compliance documentation before proceeding to final terms. Garrett assumed it was routine, maybe some additional certifications needed for the international transfer. Paige was already planning her weekend celebration. That afternoon, Klaus called me directly. Professional courtesy, he said. Wanted to understand the timeline of my departure and the transition procedures that were supposed to be followed. I was in my office above Murphy's working on a compliance manual for a client in Louisiana. The call was expected. I'd been counting days on my calendar, watching the violation accumulate like compound interest. Mr. Donovan, this is Klaus Wagner from Nordic Energy Solutions. We are reviewing Lone Star's regulatory standing as part of acquisition due diligence. Yes, sir. How can I help you? Can you confirm the timeline of your departure and any transition procedures that were implemented? I gave him the dates. Restructured on day 1, resigned effective day 42, final day 56. I explained the proper procedures, confirmed that no formal replacement had ever been designated. When he asked if I'd attempted to notify Lone Star of the compliance gap, I mentioned the binder regulatory continuity, archive only. I told him third shelf, left side and legal storage should still be there. We found it, Klaus said. Very thorough documentation. Section 11.4 of the Business Continuity Plan appears to address this exact scenario. Yes, sir. I wrote that clause in 2018 after watching a competitor get hit with $2.8 million in fines for improper compliance handoff. Seemed like prudent risk management. Indeed. Are you currently available for consulting engagement? Depends on the scope and timeline. What did you have in mind? Day 157, Friday morning. Dr. Weber called an emergency meeting. Garrett, Page, the board, legal counsel, everyone who mattered. She laid out the situation in terms that left no room for interpretation. Lone Star Industrial has been operating in violation of federal compliance requirements for 134 days. The regulatory fines currently total $110,000 and increase by $15,000 daily until resolved. Page started to interrupt. Dr. Weber held up her hand. Furthermore, every compliance document submitted during this period is legally invalid. This includes API certifications, environmental filings, and regulatory representations made to Nordic Energy Solutions during preliminary negotiations. Garrett's voice was barely a whisper. What does this mean for the acquisition? It means the acquisition is terminated, Dr. Weber said flatly. Effective immediately. Our legal team has identified material misrepresentation that creates unacceptable liability exposure. Klaus Wagner opened his laptop and turned the screen toward the table. Your compliance violations create significant liability exposure for any acquiring entity. But more concerning is the pattern of misrepresentation. Mr. Donovan left detailed documentation showing that proper procedures were available and ignored. He clicked to the next slide. Section 11.4 of your own business continuity plan, authored by Mr. Donovan, explicitly outlines the 21-day requirement. This was not an oversight. This was negligence. Page's voice cracked slightly. We didn't see that documentation. It was filed in your legal archive with clear labeling, Klaus replied. Mr. Donovan followed proper procedure. Your organization did not. Dr. Weber closed her laptop slowly. This is a material breach of due diligence representations. We need to pause acquisition proceedings pending legal review. Page tried one more time. What if we bring Carl back immediately? Full reinstatement, whatever it takes. Klaus consulted his notes. Mr. Donovan is listed as an independent consultant. He may not be available for employment. The room went dead quiet. Garrett's face had gone gray. Page had mentioned something about fixing this in a day, bringing me back. But Dr. Weber was already standing up. Mr. Crawford, your company has been operating in federal violation for over 4 months while representing full compliance to potential buyers. This creates exposure for Nordic Energy Solutions that we cannot accept. The Nordic team was packed and gone by noon. Their final act was to formally notify Lone Star's board that due diligence had revealed material compliance violations and misrepresentation of regulatory standing. The press release went out Monday morning. Nordic Energy Solutions withdraws from Lone Star Industrial acquisition due to unresolved regulatory compliance issues. Lone Star stock opened down 22% and kept falling. By market close, it had dropped 38% in a single day. The business press picked up the story immediately. Headlines like, "Compliance Failure Kills a $165 million deal," and "When Cost-Cutting Goes Wrong." The Dallas Business Journal ran a feature about the importance of regulatory oversight in manufacturing acquisitions. Tuesday morning, my phone rang again. Dr. Weber this time. Mr. Donovan, Nordic Energy Solutions is interested in retaining your services for a comprehensive compliance review of our North American operations. 18-month contract, $285 per hour. Full autonomy over methodology and timeline. Are you available? I looked around my little office. Coffee maker that worked half the time. View of the old refinery, and a stack of consulting contracts that had tripled my old salary. Yes, ma'am. I'm available. Day 163, Wednesday afternoon. Garrett Crawford announced his early retirement, effective immediately. The press release cited personal reasons and desire to spend time with family. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership transitions and operational restructuring. Page was asked to submit her resignation by Friday. No press release for that one. Thursday morning, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Carl, this is Page. Hope we can connect about industry best practices. No hard feelings. I read it twice, then deleted it. 6 months later, I moved into my new office at Nordic Energy Solutions North American headquarters in Dallas. Corner office, 23rd floor, view of downtown. My assignment was simple: review compliance procedures for all Nordic U.S. facilities and recommend improvements. The work was familiar, but the scale was impressive. 14 manufacturing plants across 9 states, each with different regulatory requirements and local compliance challenges. Nordic wanted a unified system that could handle federal oversight, state regulations, and international standards. The work was exactly what I'd been doing at Lone Star, but with proper resources and management that understood the value of getting it right. Tommy called that weekend, excited about his acceptance into a summer internship program with a compliance consulting firm in Houston. He'd been following the Lone Star story in the business news. "Dad, they're using this as a case study in my business law class. Professor says it's a perfect example of how cutting corners on compliance can destroy shareholder value. What's your take on it? That someone at Lone Star knew exactly what they were doing when they wrote those procedures, and someone else ignored them because they thought they knew better. Smart kid, your old man's proud of you. I've been thinking about specializing in oil equipment compliance. Professor says the field's growing, especially with all the international acquisitions happening. Good choice. There's always demand for people who can keep companies out of trouble." 1 year later, I was sitting in my Nordic office reviewing the final compliance report. 14 facilities, unified procedures, 0 regulatory violations, projected annual savings of $1.8 million through improved efficiency and reduced legal exposure. Dr. Weber had already asked about extending the contract. Nordic was expanding their U.S. operations and wanted me to help evaluate potential acquisitions. That evening I walked down to Murphy's for coffee. Murphy was closing up but poured me a cup anyway. "How's the new job?" he asked. "Can't complain. Turns out experience is worth something after all." "Funny how that works. You know what my grandfather used to say about the oil business?" "What's that?" "The man who knows why the well was drilled that way will always have work. The man who thinks he can drill it better without asking why will always be looking for work." Some people spend their careers trying to be seen. I spent mine knowing where the emergency shutoffs were located. My mistake at Lone Star was assuming someone else would read the safety manual when I left. They didn't replace me, they erased me, and like any good safety protocol, the consequences were built right into the system. Page had called compliance legacy friction with outdated operational overhead. Turns out legacy knowledge is what keeps companies alive when the regulations change and the lawyers come calling. Business is good. Really good. Just took them $165 million to figure that out.